Hey, what's up, fam? It's great to see you for another week of lunchtime updates. Hope your weekend was great. It's been interesting for me. Today's Monday, so usually on Mondays I sit down in the morning early and start walking through like what my week's going to look like, and it's been interesting as we think about we're setting in this season of just kind of getting ready to start phasing back into whatever normalcy is going to look like, at least over the next couple of months. And it was interesting for me to look at my schedule, and I've been commenting on this for a while, just having the mindset of there's probably some things in my schedule that you kind of controlled you instead of being this thing that allowed you to be the people that God created you to be. And so I started really looking at that, particularly this morning. And I've been reading and rereading this little book, Making All Things New by Henry Nouwen. And I actually shared, I don't know, maybe last week or the week before, his perspective on suffering, and really, really good. I'm just going to reiterate that because it's so good, and then I'll jump into what's next. He said, as long as we believe that our pains and struggles connect us with our fellow men and women, and thus make us a part of a common human struggle for a better future. So this idea that we're all connected, we're all in this thing together, and there's things that we can do together to get through it, to make it better. We are quite willing, as long as that's true, we are quite willing to accept this demanding task, task of being culture changers, of being people that bring hope to a hopeless situation. And then he says this, but when we think of ourselves as passive bystanders who have no contribution to make in the story of our life, our pains are no longer growing pains, and our struggles no longer offer new life, because we have a sense that our lives die out behind us and do not lead us anywhere. I was just struck, we're in this series about Easter is every day, and this idea of choose our own deaths, realizing that there's some things that we have to let go of in our lives, right? And one of the authors talks about the difference between a terminal death and a paschal death. Paschal death has to do with the story of Easter. So when and he describes it here, when we just give up and just say there's nothing good can come out of this, there's a sense that just leads to death. Terminal death is like just nothingness, right? And then, but if we recognize this idea that laying down our lives and choosing new life is this Easter story, this idea that death doesn't have to lead to death, but actually death can lead to life, is this great thing that he's talking about, and this idea that recognizing we all have things to offer, we all have things to add. We all have a contribution we can make. So that was what we said a couple weeks ago. And let me talk about this week. So he says this, today worrying means to be occupied and preoccupied with many things, while at the same time being bored, resentful, depressed, and lonely. And for me, that's a picture of busyness, right? That as we look back at our schedule a month ago, or our calendars maybe a month ago, maybe full of lots of things, very busy, and maybe too busy. And he says, I'm not trying to say that all of us are worried in such a way all the time, yet there's little doubt in my mind that the experience of being filled and yet unfulfilled, like having very full schedules and yet somehow feeling like we're missing out, touches most of us to some degree for some time. He said the most notable characteristics of worrying is that it fragments our lives. The many things to do, to think about, to plan for, the many people to remember, to visit, maybe to please, to talk with, many causes to attack or defend. All of these pull us apart and make us lose our center. Worrying causes us to be all over the place, and he says, but seldom at home. One way to express the spiritual crisis of our time is to say most of us have an address, but we cannot be found there. We know where we belong, but we are being pulled away in so many directions, as if we are homeless. All these other things keep demanding our attention. They lead us so far from home that we eventually forget our true address. That is the place where we can be addressed. And he concludes, he says, Jesus responds to this condition of being filled and yet unfulfilled, very busy and yet unconnected, all over the place yet never at home. And Jesus wants us to bring us to the place where we belong. But his call to live a spiritual life can only be heard when we are willing to honestly confess our own homelessness and worrying existence, to recognize the fragment effect on our daily life. Only then can a desire for true home develop. It is this desire that Jesus speaks of when he says, do not worry, set your hearts on his kingdom, and all these other things will be gathered to you. A little bit from this quarantine period over the next couple of weeks, to keep those things in mind and to just focus on, man, what does it really feel like for me to be at home, to be at a place where I'm known and loved spiritually, and just recognize that gift is the gift of Jesus. The gift of relationship with Jesus is the gift of being home. And when he says, seek you first the kingdom of God, it's really an invitation of life in him, where we can find our spiritual home, where we can find our center spiritually and emotionally, where we can find our heart center, and then all those other things can get added on top of that. And so let's just not rebuild our schedules and start putting everything and then try and figure out where Jesus fits in. Let's move into a season where Jesus actually does become the center and the place that we call home. Love you guys. Hope you have a great week. Looking forward to seeing you at noon. Looking forward to connecting with you. Have a great day. As always, if you need anything, will you let us know? We have this email, prayer@westwoodcc, where we would love to just take your prayer requests or your just requests for needs or your places in your life where you're feeling heavy. We just would love to carry some of that with you and carry that to the feet of God the Father, who loves you tremendously and can carry some of that weight. So we just comment maybe, or just send us a request or a comment on our email, prayer@westwoodcc. Love you guys. See you. Bye.